Forgotten Bombs, Bali 2005, deals with suicide in the context of suicide bombings. Death and murder feature. Please take care while listening.
Previously on Forgotten Bombs, Bali 2005.
An attack in Bali will be covered by the international media. In this way, the world will get the message that an attack has been directed at America and its allies.
These are the words of Azhari Hussein. Azhari was a bomb maker with years of experience. By 2005, Azhari was one of the leaders in this plot to attack Bali. From 9.6 Digital, this is Forgotten Bombs, Bali 2005. I'm Joe Frost. Oh, I thought you were in the nightclub. It's one of the most common responses I get from people when the matter of my experience in Bali comes up. Generally, I steer clear of talking about it, although not through any sense of trauma. It's just a lightning quick way to ruin a conversation. But on those rare occasions that the right moment comes along with the right person, they often reveal they believed I survived the 2002 Bali bombings. It's not an unreasonable assumption. With 202 people killed in Paddy's Pub and the Sari Club, it's the deadliest attack in Indonesian history. The 88 Aussies who were murdered also make it the worst peacetime loss of life in Australian history. Just the size of the attack in Kuta made it statistically most likely to have been the Bali bombing I survived. Then there's the simple fact it's a much better known incident. October 12, 2002 produced scenes of bloodied people stumbling out of a blazing inferno, with dozens of others dead and dying in that same building. Something like that leaves an indelible mark on a nation. But when it happens for a second time, and at a much smaller scale, it's just less memorable. Coming barely a year after 9/11, the nominal start of the War on Terror, the 2002 Bali bombing brought the previously concerning possibility that terrorism could hit at home into terrifying reality. Then, in 2003, Australians were killed in the bombing of the Jakarta Marriott. In 2004, the Australian embassy in that same city was bombed. In fact, in the 3 years following the first Bali bombing, Australian civilians had been injured or killed in more than a dozen terror attacks in Pakistan, Turkey, Iraq, Saudi Arabia, Afghanistan, India, and the UK. By 2005, global terrorism was so prevalent in news and politics that I don't think I was the only person who had started to tune it out. There was a public sense of terror fatigue. When considered like that, the reason most people think I survived Bali 2002 is because they don't remember Bali 2005. We're the La Bianca house of terror in Bali. In academic circles, the 2005 attacks are referred to as Bali 2. It's a sequel. It must be defined, at least in part, by the event that makes it number 2. There is also an undeniable logic to it being a sequel, given common characters played a key role in both events. And it made the story easy to summarise when questions of who the hell did this came up. It was Jemaah Islamiyah, the group that did the first Bali bombing. That was the truth as it was understood in 2005. But in the years that have followed, so much more has come to light. Bali 2005 was part of a campaign of attacks carried out across the first decade of this century. Dozens of people played a part over those years, but the common thread was the leadership. 2 men who had enough money, resources, and training to oversee a series of bombings devastating and sophisticated enough to kill on a mass scale. Their names were Nordin Top and Azhari Hussein. They would become the most wanted men in Indonesia, and they had sworn an oath to Jemaah Islamiyah. But what does it mean to be a member of JI? Can you ever truly leave? If no one above you at JI gave the order to kill, who is responsible for what you do? In essence, when do your actions stop being those of your network and start being simply yours? The 2005 attack was planned by members of JI. But a JI attack? No, I don't believe it was. the wake of Bali 1, the terrorists responsible gained a certain level of notoriety in Australia, with men like Amrozi, Imam Samudra, and Mukhlas gaining name recognition. Perhaps the name that became best well known was Hambali. I suspect the main reason being that this Bali bomber had the word Bali in his name. But Hambali also loomed large in the Aussie consciousness, because while Amrozi, Samudra, and Mukhlas were all in police custody by the end of 2002, Hambali was more elusive. Eventually, he was caught. Today, Hambali is in Guantanamo Bay, where he has been held since 2006. A source told me Hambali is in good health, good spirits, eats well and exercises, and has dyed his hair and beard red using henna. What follows about Hambali is based on reporting in the media and legal documents that have been published over the past 20 plus years. However, while he is incarcerated, any allegations that Hambali has broken the law are just that, allegations. According to a US Department of Defense memo from 2008,
Detainee is a member of Al-Qaeda and a senior member of JI. Detainee had associations with senior members of Al-Qaeda, facilitated Al-Qaeda operations, and is assessed to be responsible for multiple bombings in Southeast Asia. Detainees acted as an operational planner in multiple terrorist attacks. Detainees facilitated money, personnel, and supplies to Al-Qaeda and JI terrorist operations. Detainee's life and personal actions reflect his commitment to the most extreme Islamic ideology.
Hambali is not his real name. Born in West Java in 1961, Ridwan Isamuddin moved to Malaysia in 1985 looking for work. Instead, he found Abdullah Sunkar and Abu Bakr Bashir, two radical clerics in exile from Indonesia, who together created JI. Easily recognisable with his long white beard, Bakr Bashir gained notoriety in Australia in the 2000s as the spiritual leader of JI, who was arrested for his role in Bali 1. He smiled a lot, spent relatively little time behind bars. But for most of his adult life, Bakr Bashir was the junior partner. Abdullah Sunkar was a large man with a loud voice. He was intelligent, charismatic, and liked to laugh. The two first met in the 1950s, and by the 1970s they had created their own boarding school. Bakr Bashir was the teacher, but Abdullah Sunkar was the headmaster. Bakr Bashir was co-founder of JI, but Sunkar was the inaugural emir, or spiritual leader. In 1985, Hambali spent 6 months studying at the feet of Sunkar and Bashir before the young man was selected for further training. Throughout the 1980s, war was raging in Afghanistan as Soviet forces faced off against a loosely affiliated group of guerrilla warriors who took up arms to defend their homes, the Afghan Mujahideen. Over the years, the Mujahideen's ranks swelled with Muslims from across the world who came to help their brothers repel the invading communists. Steel sharpens steel, so Sunkar and Bashir began sending their young students to Afghanistan to train in an active theatre of war. What was the name of the military academy that you were at in Afghanistan?
Yeah. The name is in Persian language. Harbi Pohantun Mujahideen Afghanistan. The meaning is Military Academy of Mujahideen Afghanistan.
In 2003, Nasir Abbas was a high-ranking JI member who was arrested by the Indonesian police under suspicion of hiding the 2002 Bali bombers. But in 1987, Nasir was just a teenage disciple of Sunkar and Bashir, who had travelled to Afghanistan to attend the military academy.
So we learned everything, such as small arm, until the heavy weapon, including the artillery. So all kinds of guns, ammunitions, like explosive, everything about how to mixing the bomb, to do the sabotage, make booby trap, and how to do fight, tactical training. Yeah, we learned that everything in the 3 years.
And it was there, while training in the military academy, that Nasir first met Hambali.
I can tell that Hambali is a quite smart person. Yeah, even he's not the first rank in the class. Yeah, but he's a bright person, smart, and also care to the others. He has a nice word when he talk. When he talk to the others with Indonesian language, he has a what they say a soft word that he use. Yeah, people will impressed with him and can close to him. He kind to the others.
Hambali's time in Afghanistan was relatively short, less than 2 years. Although along with learning critical skills in combat and bomb making, Hambali also first made contact with a lanky young Saudi from a billionaire family who was making a name for himself.
In my time, when I was in Afghanistan 80s, we all know about Osama bin Laden, and some of us have a chance to go to the camp of Osama bin Laden. Osama bin Laden, of course, we know Afghanistan Mujahideen also know that he good donators, yeah, who helping financial, helping to make a road and everything for construction, yeah, for the Mujahideen.
While Hambali left Afghanistan in 1989, Nasir stayed on, graduating in 1990 and then spending 3 years as a weapons instructor at the academy. When Nasir returned to Malaysia, Sunkar and Bashir were no longer just his teachers. They were his superiors, having officially established JI in 1993. They were no longer sending young men to Afghanistan, but still needed a place outside Indonesia to train their recruits.
1994, my superior ordering me to go to Philippines, helping the Bangsamoro people there, the separatists from the MILF, Moro Islamic Liberation Front. So late 1994, I start to set up a camp in the heart of jungle in Mindanao, together with the separatists there. Hambali, who teach me the language of Philippines, because 1989, when he back from Afghanistan, he was been ordered to go to Philippines, stay there and learn how the separatists living, yeah, how they survive, yeah, how they choose the area, the camp. So later on, 1994, when Abdullah Sungkar Abu Bakar Bashir, he ordered me to go to the Philippines, and he is the one who teach me the language.
Having established a training camp in the Philippines for JI, Sunkar and Bashir sent Nasir and Hambali to Myanmar.
The mission is to set up a camp in the land of Arakan to help the Rohingya people. So we went there, me and Hambali, only 2%. We went there through Bangladesh. From the back door, yeah, we go past through the Rohingya people in Arakan. And then when I observed the area, I met the people from in the jungle, and I stayed there around a week.
It was decided that Myanmar was not the right situation for JI, but Sunkar and Bashir's vision was expanding. Over the next few years, Nasir and Hambali both rose through the ranks to positions of leadership in JI, albeit in different geographical commands, known as Mantikis. Hambali was head of Mantiki 1, while Nasir was a leader of Mantiki 3. And that separation gave them autonomy from one another in both their objectives and their actions. Since leaving Afghanistan in 1989, Hambali had continued to cultivate his relationship with Osama bin Laden. The US Department of Defense alleged that in 1996, Hambali spent several days meeting with bin Laden in Afghanistan, where it was agreed that JI and Al-Qaeda would form an alliance. For Hambali, this alliance meant more than just sharing intelligence and personnel. It meant following bin Laden's grand vision for global violence. In 1998, bin Laden issued a fatwa, which included the passage, "To kill the Americans and their allies, civilians and military, is an individual duty for every Muslim." For clarity's sake, Nasir Abbas refers to this as the 1999 fatwa, which could be when Hambali first brought it to JI, or a simple slip when remembering a detail from 25 years ago.
1999, Hambali bring what they call as fatwa, from Osama bin Laden. So when I read this statement, I tell to Hambali that I cannot accept this because it's against on my knowledge and it's against the Sharia. In Islam, whenever people do jihad, fighting in the battlefield, there's a rule. Yeah, we cannot kill the civilians. We cannot targeting the women, children, the old men, people. We cannot destroying the holy place of the others religious by intentionally. So this is what I never agree with Osama bin Laden and Hambali. And we have a small argument, yeah, because he blamed me not to believe Osama bin Laden, not to follow Osama bin Laden, and later we never met. That is the last time, 1999, we met.
According to Nasir, the fatwa was not universally accepted by JI. In Mantiki 3, Nasir told his members not to get involved. But in Mantiki 1, members under Hambali's command were allegedly encouraged to follow bin Laden's orders and kill the Americans and their allies, civilians and military.
It started on 2000. Whenever Hambali and his colleague from Jemaah Islamiyah who tried to implement the statement of Osama bin Laden. On 2000, there's more than 30 churches in all around Indonesia. Yeah, in the Christmas Eve on 2000 are being terrored by the bomb inside the church.
Islamic extremists bombing Christian churches on Christmas Eve sounds like a recipe for reprisals, revenge, and retaliatory violence. That was the plan. But if he was going to target dozens of churches, Hambali needed a dedicated bomb maker, someone with an engineer's understanding of explosives. He knew just the man. Azhari Hussein's childhood and early education could not have been more different from that of Nasir Abbas and Hambali. Where those two went from Malaysia to Afghanistan to train in an active war zone, as a teenager, Azhari was sent from his family home in Malaysia to the Australian city of Adelaide. Azhari arrived in the City of Churches in the 1970s as a teenager, first as a high school student, before heading to the University of Adelaide to study engineering.
He would drink, he would play soccer, he would socialise. He was just a fun guy, an engineering student. They're all known for drinking. They're legendary. My name's David Craig. I have over 22 years experience with the Australian Federal Police, predominantly in the areas of covert operations, counterintelligence, intelligence and counterterrorism.
David Craig spent a short but significant burst of his career trying to understand Azhari and ultimately bring him to justice. Because David Craig was a Detective Superintendent at the Australian Federal Police at the time of the 2005 Bali Bombing.
And I had an opportunity to act as the commander of counterterrorism. So I said, yeah, sure, I can do that. And I was supposed to start on I think it was going to be the 2nd, the 2nd of October. But this bombing happened on the 1st, and because the boss had already gone, everything was directed to me.
A previous episode quoted from The Bali Project, the 34-page document that was put together to plan the 2005 Bali bombing in meticulous detail. Azhari was likely its primary author. But decades before he was one of the prime suspects in killing and maiming Aussies in the 2005 Bali bombing, Azhari had spent 4 years in Australia, where he embraced the local culture. Perhaps a little too much.
He, in his time there, was a fun-loving guy. He failed a lot of his subjects, and his family weren't very happy with that. And he went back to Malaysia, where he must have borne a fair bit of shame with the family for not achieving what he should have.
Azhari returned to Malaysia, where he pulled his head in enough to earn his degree. From there, he continued his education in the United Kingdom, studying at the University of Reading, where he was awarded his PhD. When Dr. Azhari Hussein returned to Malaysia in the early 1990s, he did so a married man with a family who had a good job at the University of Technology, Malaysia. Life, however, was not without its complications. Azhari and his wife had struggled to conceive and lost a baby in the early stages of pregnancy.
This miscarriage and the difficulty in conceiving, it all came to a head then a few months later when he was in Jakarta and his wife got throat cancer. It looked like she was going to die, So therefore, he's still paying this price for all the wrongs that he'd done. This is what's being preached in his ear by Sunkar and Abu Bakr Bashir, who in no small way influenced Azhari.
I suppose we'll never truly know exactly what caused him to be radicalised because life is a whole big pastiche of experiences and...
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So Azhari was radicalised for a number of things, but once he was, there was no turning back. And it shows that there's a stereotype of Islamic suicide bombers as all being poor, uneducated, manipulated people, but some of them, I'd say a fair majority, are not. That they are just simply very, very religious, and they've been taught from that this is in the Quran, that this is what you must do. And if they believe that, if people are going to kill for the sake of God, in the name of God, and they have salvation, and their family on earth are going to be well looked after, and when they die, they'll be looked after in the afterlife as well, it makes it probably a pretty attractive thing for someone that's very disenchanted with life.
Azhari was not alone in finding faith in J.I. One of his university students in Johor Bahru was also a convert to the teachings of Sunkar and Bashir. His name was Nordin Muhammad Top. About a decade younger than Azhari, specific details about Nordin's childhood and early education aren't as well known. We do know that by the mid-90s, Nordin had graduated from university in his hometown of Johor Bahru, where he had grown close to one of his lecturers, Azhari. We also know Nordin spent a brief period as an accountant before taking on a leadership role at Luqman al-Hakim, a school that had been established by Sunkar and Bashir and was run by future Bali 1 leader, Mukhlas. And we know that in 1997, Azhari and Nordin officially swore their allegiance to Sunkar and Bashir's organisation, because Nasir Abbas was there to see it, and to accept the two of them into his platoon.
On 1997, Nordin M. Top and Azhari became member of Jemaah Islamiyah. I am the witness that these people, some of the few people, including Nordin M. Top and Azhari, sang an oath to become Jemaah Islamiyah members. Because of one of the leader in Johor Bahru under Mukhlas, and then Mukhlas asked me to accept Nordin M. Top and Azhari to become one of my under my platoon.
The night of the 2005 Bali bombings, David Craig began an intensive crash course in the life and crimes of Azhari and Nordin. He assessed the two as having completely different personalities, which made for complementary skill sets.
Yeah, that's right. Azhari wasn't a particularly likeable person. He was actually fairly quiet, very, very intelligent. He'd been, trained in the Philippines and also Afghanistan. He certainly had a lot of credibility with his technical expertise. His bomb making was particularly, his strong suit. But interpersonal skills were fairly ordinary. Nordin Top was a very charismatic person, so the way he was able to recruit people for suicide bombings was quite remarkable. People liked him. He was a very likeable person. He was charismatic, he was very personal, he was very good at selling the global fight for jihad and cleansing yourself and manipulating these people.
As their first commanding officer in JI, I asked Nasir what he thought of Nordin and Azhari as people.
Azhari is a lecturer, and Nordin M. Top at the time as a student. They both in the same university. But as a lecturer, Azhari as a lecturer is a teacher, is not a leader. But Nordin M. Top, even he is a student, but he's a leader. He is the one who called people to join the Islamic study group. He is the one who influenced the lecturer and also the other student to join with the study group. So he lead.
Nasir was so impressed, he gave Nordin command of his 10 fellow new recruits, which included his former teacher, Azhari.
I feel comfortable and I feel satisfied whenever Nordin lead these 10 members in the group. And I found that he's a good leader. But later on, August 1997, my superior ordered me to go to Sandakan Sabah. So only a few months, yeah, they both be under member under my command. Later on, I do not know. So they under Hambali.
Having moved from the leadership of Nasir to Hambali, Nordin and Azhari were first sent to a JI camp in the Philippines for a few weeks of training.
But later in 1999, Hambali sent Jemaah Islamiyah members to Kandahar to Al Qaeda, and he sent Azhari to go to Afghanistan. Nordin M. Top not go to Afghanistan because he be the leader of Islamic boarding school in Johor Bahru, belong to Jemaah Islamiyah. Luqmanul Hakim, the name of the school. So Azhari later get more knowledge about explosive mixing chemicals and set up a bomb, a big bomb size in Afghanistan on 1999. And then on 2000, they involved in the Christmas Eve bomb in Indonesia.
Throughout the 1990s, Hambali continued to cultivate relationships with violent extremists across the globe, allegedly establishing himself as the most prominent and impactful terrorist in Southeast Asia. According to the UN Security Council, who refer to Hambali as Isamuddin,
Isamuddin was considered JI's Director of Operations, which oversaw JI's financing and served as the primary interface for Al-Qaeda. He was Al-Qaeda's Operations Director for the Southeast Asia region. Isamuddin was involved in the 1995 Operation Bojinka plot to bomb 11 United States commercial airliners in Asia. Isamuddin was videotaped in a January 2000 Al-Qaeda meeting with two of the 9/11 hijackers. Isamuddin helped several veterans who had just finished training in Karachi, Pakistan, to facilitate the USS Cole bombing.
these operations had global aims and impacts. However, on Christmas Eve 2000, Hambali allegedly brought his particular brand of terror home to Indonesia. On that day, across 11 different cities in Indonesia, approximately 50 bombs were placed in or near Christian churches. The precise number of devices is in dispute for reasons that will become clear. Ultimately, 18 people were killed and more than 100 were injured. In July 2003, as part of an inquiry into Australia's relations with Indonesia, the Australian Federal Police described the Christmas Eve attack as the first coordinated bombing operation undertaken by JI. The attacks represented a significant change in the general strategy and tactics employed by JI since the migration of their leadership and operation base back to Indonesia in late 1990s. Having spent some 15 years in Malaysia, Sunkar and Bashir had returned to Indonesia in 1999, following the fall of President Suharto. It was to prove a brief return for Abdullah Sunkar, who died of cancer in October 1999. In his place, Abu Bakr Bashir stepped up to become the leader and emir of JI. According to Nasir Abbas, what happened on Christmas Eve the following year was to prove a huge turning point for JI, for Hambali, and for terrorism in Indonesia.
It is not a Jemaah Islamiyah operation. It is Hambali operation. And because of the weakness of the Amir of Jemaah Islamiyah, the weakness of Abu Bakr Bashir to lead Jemaah Islamiyah, it used by Hambali. It has opportunity by Hambali, for Hambali to do the operation. And Abu Bakr Bashir cannot stop him.
I have spoken to people who said things may have been very different if Abdullah Sunkar had not passed away, that he was a stronger leader. Exactly. Okay, the Jemaah Islamiyah was established on 1st January on 1993. I graduated on 1990. Hambali graduated on 1989. So most of the leaders in Jemaah Islamiyah, when it was being established on 1993, most of them was graduated from the military academy of Mujahideen Afghanistan. Most of them knows how to use the guns, ammunition, how to make a big bomb,
The question is, why it's not happened any operation since 1993 until 2000? There is no operation. They not do any such operation against the civilians until the statement of Osama bin Laden on 1999. And Abdullah Sunkar passed away on 1999.
Nasir remembers the day he heard Abu Bakr Bashir had taken Abdullah Sunkar's place as head of JI.
I feel frustrated. I'm not hate Abu Bakr Bashir. I just feel uncomfortable because I know that he's not a leader. He's a teacher. You know that Jemaah Islamiyah is a big group. Yeah, the big group need a leader. So the problem start when Abu Bakr Bashir be the Amir of Jemaah Islamiyah.
With Bashir now in charge of JI, Nasir said Hambali felt he had the authority to enact, or a lack of authority to stop him from enacting, the violent upheaval that bin Laden said was necessary.
Hambali changed it. Yeah, they agreed to implement the statement of Osama bin Laden to do revenge, and they used some of the people in Jemaah Islamiyah who know how to fight, who has experience in Afghanistan or in the Philippines, to implement the statement of Osama bin Laden. So that is a starting point, why Jemaah Islamiyah involved in the crime, in the terrorism action. Some of Jemaah Islamiyah disagree with that, including me.
With Azhari recently returned from an Al-Qaeda masterclass in Afghanistan, Hambali had a highly skilled bomb maker in his ranks to help ignite this upheaval.
Because Azhari was, of course, behind the 47 bombings on Christmas Eve in churches, which, is just such a callous and cowardly thing to do, to be attacking places of worship on their most significant night.
Despite the death and mayhem, for Hambali and Azhari, the bombings were not a resounding success. As a bomb maker, Azhari had done a relatively shoddy job, with a large portion of his explosives failing, while at least 2 exploded while still in the hands of the perpetrators, killing 2 terrorists.
Yes, so some of the bombs didn't actually detonate, and it was because of humidity in Indonesia was so different to the dry environment in Afghanistan, whereas Azhari had practiced his bomb-making skills, and so about 50% of the bombs didn't detonate. And what it indicates to me is they can't have done too many practice runs, that they just didn't have the resources, or they were pressed for time to get the bombings to happen.
It was to prove a vital lesson for Azhari. From then on, plastic containers would become a feature in his bombs, shielding the detonation device from the elements, regardless of how wet the weather. As for Hambali, the Christmas Eve attacks were a failure not just because half Azhari's bombs failed to do their job, but because even the ones that worked did not achieve his aims.
Because that was meant to start a holy war between Christians and Muslims in Indonesia. But the good thing was that the Christian community, as small as it is there, had already forgiven the bombers and the attackers almost immediately. And some of the more astute imams came out and said that they did not give the imprimatur for these bombings to happen, that it was haram, that it should not have happened. And that, in fact, brought the Muslim community and the Christian community a lot closer together, but infuriated people like JI, because that's the exact opposite of what they wanted. It all melts away when it comes to good versus evil. And in that situation, I think the Muslim and the Christian community did an outstanding job.
Christmas Eve 2000 was when Nasir's understanding of JI shifted, causing concerns that cut to the core of his own faith.
In Islam, there's the obligation from every single Muslim. Perhaps you heard these words, Amar Ma'ruf, Nahi Anil Munkar. The meaning is to tell the good deeds and to prevent the bad deeds. So this is an obligation for every single Muslim. So I am a Muslim. Yeah, I know that what they did is not jihad. They bombed the churches, they bombed the civilians. Yeah, it is not a good deeds. Yeah, it's a bad deeds. So my obligation as a Muslim is to stop the bad deeds. So whenever I was being arrested, and I say that I disagree with that, yeah, and I always try to stop. So police say that if you want to stop, so we also want to stop. It is a crime. So this is my reason why I agree to assist the police to stop the bad deeds.
For Nasir, there was a clear distinction between taking up arms against the Soviet army in Afghanistan and bombing Christian civilians in church, and it was a distinction he believed would incur the wrath of a far higher power than Indonesia's police force.
In our belief, when we make something wrong, God will angry. That is what we believe. So whenever they start to do the churches bombing on 2000, I say that it's wrong. God will get angry. It's not jihad.
The Christmas Eve attacks had started a chain of events. In the decade to follow, hundreds of innocent people would be killed, with further hundreds more injured. Hambali's part in it all would be brought to an end relatively shortly. But by the time he was in CIA custody, his protégés, Azhari and Nordin, were armed with the knowledge to create bombs and the authority to act without asking. The final piece in the puzzle for Azhari and Nordin was learning to convince young men to sacrifice their very lives. Young men like Salek Firdos. Next time on Forgotten Bombs, Bali 2005.
The school has become as a base camp for Jemaah Islamiyah. All the activities is there.
Nordin Top started to leverage small study circles, use the internet to disseminate propaganda and to be able to indoctrinate younger followers into serving as suicide bombers.
And look, I couldn't do anything other than lie there and think about it. Couldn't sleep, couldn't eat. So all I had to do was think about it, and it was probably one of the worst things that I can imagine happening to any parent.
Forgotten Bombs, Bali 2005, is written, produced and presented by me, Joe Frost. Audio production by Elliot Beavis. Original music by Dan Flegg. Additional voices by TJ Connors and Svenja Niebuhr. You can find David Craig on Instagram at official Dr. David Craig. For a full list of sources, episode transcripts and photos, head to our website, 9.6.com.au. That's number 9, POINT, number 6. Special thanks to my family. All the thanks to Fiona. Forgotten Bombs is a 9.6 digital production.